to.
Okay, we're going to get started, folks.
Do you want that?
She hasn't committed yet.
Good evening and welcome. This is the fourth public hearing of the Finance and Warrant Commission, April 30, 2018. Westwood Media Center is here. Thank you, Connor, for being here. We give you permission to tape the meeting. Is there anyone else who would like to record the meeting? I see no affirmative responses. With that, if we could ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we are here for a fourth public hearing on the remaining so-called Islington articles, which are Articles 11, 12, and 13. At the request of the Board of Selectmen, we're holding a fourth and final public hearing because there was additional information that the Board of Selectmen indicated they would like to present to us at this later date. So with that, welcome Chairman Hickey.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the members of FinCom. I thank you for your flexibility in holding this fourth hearing. This, as you know, is a complex project, and it is vitally important that we afford it all of its appropriate process. The Board of Selectmen met on Thursday evening, and I can report to you that we are aligned in our support of this project. We believe that this project, on balance, has a great many benefits to the town of Westwood. And shortly I will turn it over to our negotiating team, Nora Loughnane, Michael Walsh from the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Gillette, and our outside counsel, Dan Bailey. We believe that they have done a great job in advocating on behalf of the town and setting up a land disposition agreement. This is really an opportunity that does not come along often for many municipalities to be able to take lots of land that are joined together and create some density out of many little lots, 7 lots altogether, and create a project that we believe, when completed, will have many benefits to the town, including a multi-use type of development that will have some great retail, some opportunities to enhance the neighborhood, and some housing that's commuter-friendly. I will, like I said, turn it over to the team who has more specifics for you. And I would ask at the end of their presentation that you join me in supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the negotiating team. We could ask you to move that mobile microphone as you speak so we can record. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so if you like, we could begin with a fact sheet that we were asked to provide. We received that Friday night. I actually have an updated version that I plugged in some additional numbers that I didn't have as of Friday, but I have today. Starting at the beginning, we have the current conditions, and we have the estimated value of the 4 town-owned parcels that today total $2,575,000. That figure is taken from the estimates that were included in the request for proposals in May of 2016, and they're broken down on that sheet. We also calculate the capital investment that would be needed to continue the use of the ICC and Wentworth Hall, and that comes out to $1,959,529. So taking those two numbers together, the effective current property value is $615,471. If anyone, does everyone have a copy in front of them?
Item down.
Okay.
It's the 4th item down in this
In your
packet.
packet. Sorry, it's the one
It's pretty far down.
entitled
after
Islington
the
Center
disposition agreement.
Redevelopment Fact Sheet.
You do.
You know what, Nora, if I could
Barbara
ask you to
looks at that.
go over that again. I think people were
Sure.
trying to locate that.
What does it look like?
It starts with the summary of the land disposition agreement.
What deep is it?
It's way
About
back.
4
yeah.
pages in.
No, that's the different.
No.
It's
That's
not
on
that
the-
one.
it
That's
says-
not their packet.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
it's
not,
way
they-
That's
back.
the citizens packet.
Yes.
We got the email version, but I didn't see it in
It is, but it's pretty far at the back, Joel.
Yeah, I've got it. It's in the back.
Islington Center Redevelopment Fact Sheet,
Yes.
April
That's
30,
it.
2008.
That's it.
It's down, it's pretty down, so it's deep in.
After. Because it's not part of the agreement.
I'm going to ask Nora to go over that.
Sure.
Once everyone is situated. Does everybody have that now?
Oh, it's
Okay.
right after Exhibit J, actually, literally the next page. Yeah, right after J.
Right before that. Just before.
Yeah, because yours isn't covered.
Oh.
Okay, why don't we
Okay.
proceed?
All right, so we calculated the estimated value of the town-owned property, and we did this by adding the 4 parcel values that were carried in the May 2016 request for proposals. These were based on the assessor's documents, assessor's records for the town-owned property, and they were rounded up. The one difference is the East Street parcel is only carried on the assessor's records as $350, and we put that up to $25,000, which we thought was the minimum amount for any parcel of land. The estimated total of town-owned property is currently $2,575,000, and the capital needed to continue use of that property to make improvements on the ICC and Wentworth Hall for the Islington Branch Library comes to $1,959,529 for an effective current property value of $615,471. We also looked at the real estate taxes and other annual revenue on the current town-owned property, real estate town-owned property and the commercial property in Islington Center. So this figure looks at all 7 parcels in Islington, 4 owned by the town and 3 owned by the developer. The total real estate taxes on the commercial properties is currently $62,073. The MMO lease value is $84,000. We have other miscellaneous revenue at the ICC of $4,520. We assessed a value of the municipal space at the ICC as $40,000. This was done at the request of a resident who believed that there's value in having office space in that building, so we actually assigned the same value to the before and after conditions. Then we took the maintenance and operational expenses at the ICC, which are currently $76,380, and also deducted maintenance and operational expenses at the Islington Library, which are $13,116, and that gave us a total annual revenue for all the properties in Islington Center of $101,097. Then we looked at redevelopment conditions and compared the same factors. We looked at the estimated value of the town-owned property post-development, which would be the land that we receive from the developer. If you recall, we're going to transfer the 4 town-owned parcels to the developer and then receive back a new municipal parking lot and new land on the School Street side of Washington Street, where we would place the Wentworth Hall, renovate that building, and put an addition. We estimated the value of the land with a new parking lot developed on it at $750,000, and we estimated the value of the building at $3.5 million for a total property value of $4,250,000. Then we estimated the capital that was needed for the Wentworth Hall project. The cost to relocate and expand Wentworth Hall, from an estimate, is $3,531,265. We added a value for the cost to remove unsuitable soils and rock at $150,000. We believe that's an overestimation of what it would actually cost, and you have the soils report in your packet. And then we added the contribution from the developer, which is now $2,200,000. When we last met with you, we were hoping to get $2 million, and we were able to get an additional $200,000. So now if we take the value of the property that the town would own post-development and deduct from that the town's cost in moving, renovating, and putting an addition on Wentworth Hall, we get an effective property value of $2,768,735. So that figure you would compare to the pre-development, the current conditions of $615,000 for a substantial increase in property value. Then we looked at the revenue after post-development to compare to the revenue today. We took estimated real estate taxes from our peer review report that's been adjusted to reflect the decrease in size of the CVS building. When the peer review report was first produced, the CVS building was larger, and there was a larger tax value associated with it. So this is the lesser tax value related to the smaller building. We added $10,500 that the peer review consultant believes would come to us in estimated excise taxes from residents of the mixed-use building. We carried over the same miscellaneous revenue for Wentworth Hall that we currently receive on the ICC property for different events that occur there on a regular basis. We carried over the same $40,000 value for the value of municipal space at Wentworth Hall. Then operation and maintenance costs at Wentworth Hall of $48,470. That's extrapolated from the current operational and maintenance costs at the ICC, and then reduced for the reduction in square footage of the new building compared to the old building. I believe that number is actually well overestimated because the new building will be far more efficient. And then we added anticipated additional service costs for school, police, and fire that are associated with a new mixed-use building, $53,420, and that comes out of the peer review report as well. So the total revenue under the new redevelopment condition would be $423,986 a year, and that compares with the above value of $101,097 under existing conditions. So you can see that the property value is significantly higher post-development to current statistics, and the annual revenue is also significantly higher, more than 4 times the value. I also provided some qualitative benefits as requested. First is aesthetics. We've heard from residents over the past 2.5 years, from the time we began this project until today, how much they value the village character in Islington Center. And this project has been developed and it has evolved to, as closely as possible, reflect the existing character of Islington. The ICC building is being replaced by a replica structure, be a mixed-use building that will maintain the facade and the steeple of the existing ICC. The height of the building is actually slightly less than the height of the existing building. The gables, the overall structure are designed to mimic other buildings in the area. And we believe that the aesthetic that is created by this is a character-appropriate design that belongs in Islington Center. We'll be replacing aging and deteriorated buildings with new, fully code compliant, fully accessible, climate-controlled structures. And the overall sense of the Islington Center will be greatly improved. In addition, there'll be new outdoor seating, gathering areas, new street trees, and enhanced buffer areas compared to what we have existing today that'll separate the commercial uses from the residential uses. Then under the another benefit will be community services. The redevelopment project will improve the overall village atmosphere in Islington Center while retaining all of the current commercial tenants and all of the community uses that are there today. Mother's Morning Out Nursery School will have a new home in the renovated current CVS building. They'll receive 5,000 square feet of built-to-suit space to meet their needs, as well as an outdoor playground that also meets their requirements. We'll relocate, renovate, and expand Wentworth Hall, continue to house the Islington Branch Library and offices for youth and family services, and continue to provide all the community services and events that are currently being provided in the ICC. There'll be provisions made to make those available in the new Wentworth Hall addition. There'll be a lower level community room, which will actually be larger than the sanctuary or the hall space now. The ICC today has 2 public meeting spaces. The Wentworth Hall will have 1 public meeting space, but will actually be larger than either of those spaces, and it'll be designed to accommodate all the programs that are in the ICC today. Economic development is another area of qualitative benefit. The longstanding Islington businesses, including Matt the Barber and Crown Cleaners, will continue to operate within Islington Center. There'll be an additional 16,000 square feet of commercial space that'll be added to the area to bring new businesses. The developer is doing his best to make those the most vibrant, attractive businesses we can have, and there's an emphasis on bringing a new restaurant to Islington Center. The overall value of the commercial property will positively affect the town's split tax rate. The commercial value will increase significantly, as you could see from the increase in tax dollars that we'll see in this area. And we're hoping that that'll serve as a catalyst for rehabilitation of other properties further along Washington Street. Under the category of traffic, the developers, traffic engineers, and the peer review engineers that reviewed the project for the planning board all agree that the project will not bring significant new traffic to Islington Center. Islington clearly has a traffic problem now, just as we have here on 109. It's predominantly pass-through traffic. There are commuters that go through Westwood on their way to other locations. The solution to that traffic problem is really improving traffic outside of Westwood to encourage cars to stay on the main path. But we don't expect additional traffic to be significant here. However, the planning board did require through the special permit that the developer make signalization improvements to the Washington Street, East Street intersection, including a dedicated left-hand turn when you're going southbound on Washington Street to turn onto East Street. And we believe that will make a better experience for residents who are taking that route. In addition, the planning board required that the town maintain a section of, a strip of land on the edge of East Street, at the intersection of East Street and Washington Street, in case there's a need for future widening. I think you all have a plan in your map that looks like this in your packet that shows that strip of land. This plan shows the pre-development conditions and the post-development conditions, showing the town-owned properties in kind of a salmon color and the privately owned properties in blue. It should be a small-size map in your packet towards.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's after the.
If you'd like larger copies, I have larger copies here.
I was gonna say, we have it on email,
Yeah,
yeah.
this
Okay.
was sent in advance,
I would complain.
members,
It
by
is in
email.
that packet.
The one that was sent on Friday in the email, it didn't show the strip of land along East Street, so this is an updated map to show that the town will maintain ownership of that land. We had mentioned this before, that if there's a need, right now the planning board doesn't believe there's a need to widen the street, but if there ever is, we wouldn't want to have to reacquire land.
They heard you.
That's probably mine.
Talking about this strip over.
All right, and then moving on to the next page of the summary, we're nearing the end. Parking. The planning board looked at parking very carefully here. Not only does the proposed development bring a significant number of new parking spaces to Islington Center, it actually increases the number of parking spaces in the center by 78 spaces over the existing. Right now, there are 100 parking spaces provided and 100 parking spaces needed for the current uses. This proposal would provide 178 parking spaces and would only require 163. So there would actually be a net of 15 parking spaces over and above the parking demand in Islington Center. Beyond that, the developer will provide shared parking easements for the town so that town residents will be able to park on the town parking spaces or on the private parking spaces, whether at the CVS store on the School Street side of the parking of the development or at the mixed-use building and MMO space on the East Street side. We'll have cross easements that allow parking in any of the spaces for convenience. Next area of qualitative improvement relates to historic preservation. The project provides a lot on Washington Street that could be the future home of the Blue Heart Tavern. It's the best effort we can make to preserve that locally historic property, and we do know that there is at least one local resident who is interested in doing that, and we're going to work with that resident and hopefully make that happen. We don't know for sure yet, and we probably won't know until the end of the summer. But we have land that can be set aside, and the developer is willing to give the building to someone who's willing to restore it and use it appropriately. So it would be located right next to Wentworth Hall. So we're hopeful that that will happen. It's the best chance for preserving that building.
Nora,
And then
excuse me, when you say use it appropriately, what do you mean?
use it for a use that's permissible under the bylaw, so a commercial use on the first floor, residential or commercial or office use on the second floor, and not just paint over the building and use it for a use that doesn't add to the area. So that will be discussed as we go through the process. And then finally, the last qualitative result, and I believe one of the most important, has to do with housing. The Islington Center Redevelopment Project has 18 condominium units, and the FMUOD bylaw requires 15% of all property units created under a special permit to be affordable. This project would therefore be required to have 3 affordable units. However, we've worked out a deal with the developer that will allow for us to actually count 12 new units, not just the 3 that are needed. This will be done by restricting 1 additional unit in the developer's previously developed 321 Washington Street project for affordable housing. That property has 12 apartments in it. 2 of the apartments are already affordable apartments. By adding 1 more of those apartments to the affordability restrictions, the building becomes 25% affordable, and we're able to count all 12 units on our subsidized housing inventory. That's a great boon to the town, and it will significantly assist us in staying above 10% on the subsidized housing inventory in 2000. The project will also have 2 additional housing units. At present, the proposal is to put them at 562 and 564 Washington Street, which are 2 apartments above the ski stop building, former ski stop building, where Matt the barber now has his shop. So that's the proposal right now. Those units would have to be approved by the Department of Housing and Community Development and the town before they would be counted as affordable units. But I think that is one of the most significant aspects of the project.
And those are rental units?
All of them would be rental units, yes. And they would all be required to meet the HUD standards for rental units. Yes.
Sorry, Nora, and you think the guesstimate right now for 2020 for required affordable units is somewhere between 10 and 20?
I think it's between 9 and 20, and it depends on which units are actually constructed. We have some projects in town that have been approved, but houses have not yet been built. For one example is Westwood Estates off of Canton Street. They have a subdivision with approval for 10 units. Those units haven't been built yet. Assuming they're all built, we'll be at the higher end. Assuming fewer of them are built, we'll be at the lower end. But somewhere between 9 and 20. And keep in mind that it only takes 1 unit to be short to be exposed to unfriendly 40B. This has it has a net increase of 12, but 9 over and above what they're required. So it will be an increase of 10 units at 321 Washington Street above the 2 that are there now, and then 2 more units that right now are at 562 and 564 Washington Street. So an overall 12 new units added to our SHI, all of which are existing housing units. So they're added to the numerator and not added to the denominator, which they're already counted in the denominator. So I think that's a great feature of the project. Then if I could walk you through, I have the next document, just follow the next page in your packet there, is a summary of the phases of the project that one of your members requested. This looks first at what happens if only phase 1 is complete. Using the same factors for the value of town-owned land, we start out with $2,725,000 of value in our land today, minus the $1,959,529 in liability on the ICC and the Wentworth Hall properties, and we get to a value of $765,471. This notes that we have funding required in phase 1 for the Wentworth Hall project. It will cost us about $400,000 to do the design work, and there's a payment that takes care of that full $400,000 from the developer. So that's a net capital investment in phase 1 of $0. Then the estimated real estate value that would come, the estimated revenue that would come at the end of Phase 1 would be $126,614 in new taxes. We would still have the $84,000 a year lease payment from MMO in the ICC, which would remain standing in Phase 1. We'd still have the miscellaneous revenue at the ICC of $4,520, and the value of the municipal space at the ICC of $40,000. We'd still have the same maintenance and operation expenses at the ICC and at the Islington Library. So the annual revenue would be about $165,638, so roughly $65,000 over what it is today. Then if we move on to
Laura,
phase.
before you move on.
Sure.
Can you, if you go back to the original sheet that tells us what the current conditions are that we discussed at the very beginning, can you explain the difference between the completion of Phase 1 and the current condition?
Yes, the current condition at the completion of Phase 1 has a higher value for the new municipal parking lot. So the municipal parking lot today, in the fact sheet that we went over, it's set at the RFP at a value of $600,000. We will receive back from the developer a newly constructed parking lot, the same number of parking spaces, but fully up to standards with all of the catch basins, the oil and water separators, properly graded and newly refinished. So it has an increased value over the property we have today. And we'll also, on that lot, receive a graded area where we can move the Wentworth Hall to. So it'll be a building site as well as a parking lot. If you look at the municipal lot now, it's nothing but the 32 parking spaces, and then it has a sloped wooded area behind it that's part of the parcel but not presently usable. So what we get back has a higher value of about $150,000 higher value.
Thank you.
Right, and then, so the estimated annual revenue at that stage, at the end of Phase 1, is $165,638. When we move to Phase 2, the conditions are that we would be turning over the Wentworth Hall property to the developer, and we would have received already the new municipal property on the west side of School Street. So at that point, the estimated value of town property, we would have the municipal lot at $750,000. We would still have, we would then have the Wentworth Hall constructed on that lot. So we would have moved Wentworth Hall, we would have put an addition on it, we would have renovated the library portion and constructed the new youth and family services portion and the community space in the basement. We believe that the value of that building would be $3.5 million. And we would still own the ICC. So we're just carrying forth the current values of the ICC and the small East Street parcel. So the total value at the completion of Phase 2 of town-owned land would be $5,475,000. Now, we would have needed to, during Phase 2, spend some money to move Wentworth Hall, renovate it, and put the addition on it. So the capital needed to continue the use of that property is shown. First, the cost to relocate and expand Wentworth Hall is $3,131,265. That took the design, the $400,000 of design money was spent in the first phase. That's the remainder of the estimate for that project. The cost to remove the unsuitable soils and rock is carried at $150,000. And the contribution we receive in Phase 2 from the developer is $400,000. So there would be a net investment by the town of $2,881,265 in Phase 2. So that gives us an effective property value at the end of Phase 2 of $2,593,735. Then we looked at the annual revenue that we'd have at the end of Phase 2. We'd have estimated real estate taxes now for both the CVS building and for the renovated, the old CVS building. We have the new CVS building and the old CVS building where MMO will go. So a total estimated real estate taxes would be $220,776. We would still have the MMO leasing space in the ICC for $84,000. We'd still have the other miscellaneous revenue in the ICC for $4,520. The value of municipal space at Wentworth Hall, now that the uses were moved to Wentworth Hall, would remain the same as it was at the ICC at $40,000. We'd have maintenance and operational costs of the ICC during this continued period, and maintenance and operational costs of the Islington Library during this period before the building was moved. The cost would probably be less than that because at some point during the phase, the property would be moved over. But taking the highest possible cost, the total annual revenue for Phase 2 would be $259,800. Yes.
This may be obvious to everyone, but a point of clarification, when you show completion of Phase 2, that really stands on its own for completion of 1 and 2.
1 and 2, that's right, that's
When you
right.
say completion of 3, it's completion of 1,
1,
2,
2, and 3,
together.
that's right, because
They're
they,
not additive, the 3 sheets are not additive.
They're not.
They stand on their own.
well, they're not independent, because by the time you get to Phase 2, Phase 1 has already occurred.
Right,
So the values are taken, the town owns what it received in Phase 1 in Phase 2, and in Phase 3, they own what they received in Phase 1 and in Phase 2. So then moving to Phase 3, upon completion of Phase 3 and completion of the entire project, the property value of the town-owned parcel, the one parcel on the west side of Washington Street, which would have the fully renovated and expanded Wentworth Hall and a 32-space parking lot, would be $4,250,000, and there would be no additional capital needed for this property. The effective property value would therefore be $4,250,000. As far as annual revenue goes, at this point, we would receive taxes on the new CVS on the west side of Washington Street, the renovated former CVS, where MMO and other commercial uses will be on the east side of Washington Street, and the new mixed-use building on the east side of Washington Street. The total annual taxes at that point are estimated to be $481,356, and that includes the real estate property taxes as well as $10,500 in excise taxes. We would still receive the miscellaneous revenue at Wentworth Hall for community programs at $4,520. We'd still value the municipal space at Wentworth Hall the same way we value it at the ICC at $40,000. We'd now have maintenance and operational expenses at the ICC of $48,470, and service costs that are new now that the mixed-use building is completed, additional costs for school, police, and fire, and the school would include an estimate of 3 new school-age children in that building, at $53,420. So the estimated total annual revenue at the completion of Phase 3, the completion of the project, would be $423,986. So both the value of the land that's owned by the town at the end of Phase 3 and the total annual revenue are significantly greater than at the start of the project at current conditions today. And then I just gave you a narrative summary of the phasing as well.
So 277 and 283 is the current library and land that it's on Wentworth Hall?
277, 283 is the municipal lot. That's the address of the municipal lot. 280 is
Okay.
the address of the library, and 288 is the address of the
Okay.
ICC.
It's
So we-
moving to that.
Right, so we don't value the library before move? The
We
work
value
of
the
that
land that the
building?
library's on. We
Okay.
don't value the building because it comes off on both sides. No, we didn't value the building ahead of time. Actually, the property value carried in the RFP is the assessor's value for the land and the building together.
That's what I was wondering, okay,
But the building has very little value.
okay, that's what I assumed.
And
Thank
same
you.
with the ICC. So in the ICC's case, the total value is 1.2 million today,
Yeah,
and the majority of that is the value of the land.
okay, thanks.
Other questions for Nora at this point? Tom?
So Nora, so the value of 3.5 million for the moved renovated Wentworth Hall, how did we come to that number?
That's based on the construction cost of the building. So it's going to be a brand-new building. We're going to carry over Wentworth Hall, but we're going to put it on a new foundation and put an addition that's equal to the size of the existing building. We're going to gut rehab the Wentworth Hall building, the structure. So the library will be new inside and out, new roof, new walls, new windows, completely redone. And that is estimated to cost $3.5 million for that work. So we believe that the value of the building when it's complete, will be at least the cost of the construction.
Any questions for Nora at this point?
Yep, Peter?
This might be more of a question for Mike, but there was a question from a citizen last time as to how much we really would spend on both the ICC and the library if nothing happens, if this doesn't get passed. Are we truly going to spend all that money to get, the $1.95 million if nothing gets approved?
I don't believe we'd spend it immediately, but it is the estimate of what it would cost within a reasonable time frame to just bring the building up to code. So, I mean, if we're gonna make if we make a decision that we're gonna keep this building as town property, then at some point in the near term, and what that is, maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit more, we would have to spend somewhere in the vicinity of that amount of money to just bring it up to code. It's like having a house that's a starter home. There's many of them in the community right now. Would you invest in brand new storm windows if you knew you were going to sell it in the next year or two, and you knew that more than likely it was going to be sold to a developer who's going to knock it down? Well, it doesn't make sense to make the investment. You're not going to increase your purchase price. Your purchase price is going to be based on what they're going to pay for the land, and that's kind of where we are with the ICC. We bought it originally intending not to make the investments in the capital because we never intended to hold on to the land in the long run.
Thank you.
It's worth noting that some of those improvements are desperately needed right now. Improvements to the handicapped accessibility are needed now. The restrooms are not up to standards. The ramp into the structure is not up to standards. But if we make the investments to bring it up to the accessibility, we trigger greater building codes. So it really all has to be done at once. It's not something that can be done piecemeal, which is why the building sits the way it is today. Either the town has to make the commitment to put that full amount of money into it, or we really can't do anything.
Yeah, Mike?
Just to follow up on that, so if I can summarize what I think I'm hearing, ICC currently operates at a loss.
No, it slightly more than breaks even. So we receive $84,000 from MMO. We receive about $4,500 from other uses, and our maintenance costs are $76,000. So it actually operates at a small profit right now, but that profit, if it were being put aside to make the capital improvements, would take over 100 years to reach the point where we could actually have the money in the bank to do the work. So,
Like I said, it operates at a loss.
yeah.
All right.
It's covering its variable costs, but it's not covering its
Exactly, so
capital
the
costs.
anticipated costs. Now, with the new structure, and obviously the value is going to be greater because the building will be a much better building, do you see additional revenues coming to the town from the ICC?
It very well could be. So we'll have a new community space that may be more attractive to other users, and we may end up having more people interested in using it for different community events, which we're able to charge for.
Okay.
Just following up on the cost of the ICC, you said it breaks nearly even, but looking at what you provided me here, in that $76,000, you have office supplies, custodial supplies, water, sewer. So these are charges that would be assessed to whatever building and aren't particularly maintenance for the ICC.
Those charges are also carried on the other end for the new building. So there are standard operational and maintenance charges that would be.
Right, but when you say it
both.
runs, so you have $88,000 of income and you allege $76,000 of expenses, but you're taking, all that $76,000 is not maintenance.
Maintenance and operation. It's operation of the building. If the building wasn't there, we wouldn't have the charges that go along with
But
it.
it's titled maintenance and operation, but like I said, you're charging office supplies, that's not a maintenance issue. Custodial supplies, not a maintenance issue.
I believe it is. Custodial supplies absolutely are a maintenance issue.
Because most of the custodial services that are provided in that building are provided for the MMO.
Yep.
Most of the water that's used in that building is used by the MMO. Most of the sewer charges that are charged in that
You have
building
town
are used.
offices in there too, I mean, you have
We have-
communications.
We We have town offices in that building, but most of that space, well, over 75% of that space is devoted to the MMO, and they're the users.
MMO doesn't provide its own custodial service?
Not, that's part of the lease agreement. We cover those expenses for them.
And you have the communications, you have copiers under here?
Right, those are all operational expenses that are carried in both the ICC and carried in the new Wentworth Hall building.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, George.
So Nora, the 1.9 million though, basically, if you start doing renovations, you have to meet current codes. But to make the building functional, I thought the cost estimates we have were, what were they now?
Yeah, so the 1.9 million is Band-Aid. It's making the minimum improvements to keep the building operating so that MMO, Youth and Family Services and Recreation Programs and community events have a place to be. If we wanted to actually make the building functional, equivalent to what we're proposing in the renovated and expanded Wentworth Hall with air conditioning and elevator, fully accessible new space, it would cost just under $4.9 million. And you still would not have energy efficient space that you'll have in the new building.
I think we're ready for the next piece of this. Thank you, Nora.
So for the next piece, what we were waiting for today, and we just got it at the end of the day, was the appraisal. Before I begin on the appraisal, I'm going to just indicate to you, originally we were intending to appraise every single parcel, but we made a decision today because of the work necessary to come up with this final product. On the School Street side of the, if you look at your maps that Nora handed out, on the School Street side of things, you see above is the parcel of land that we currently own, which is the old, former Texaco parcel. As Nora explained, it's a parking lot with some wooded land behind that's not used. And on the bottom portion, on that same side of the street, is part of the parking lot, some of the Cohen property, and around the back of the property onto land that I think is currently, or was, part of the tailor shop. The decision that was made today is that the square footage and the usable space that is being given back to us is way more valuable than the land we're going to give them. So the way this will work is we will deed over the parking lot to the developer. The developer will make all the improvements, turn back over to us a building lot and a replacement parking lot for the one we have that's brand new. And so what he's giving back to us, in effect, is larger and in way better condition and more usable for us for relocating Wentworth. So in effect, that land is worth more when we get it back at the end of phase one than it was worth when we gave it to him. So we didn't value that parcel because of that fact. So we concentrated just on valuation of the land across the street on the East Street side. And what he did was use a sale comparison approach. He identified a couple of additional parcels this weekend that were more comparable than the ones he had used originally. After conversations with us and others, and came up with the valuation of the property. When he concluded, he found that the property value was approximately $1.8 million, from which he then subtracted the cost of demolition of the ICC, which is estimated to be $375,000. The net value of the three parcels of land in that cost comparison approach was $1.4 million.
Questions for Mike on the appraisal?
Mike, I was curious, two things. The total assessment was 1.95, and typically in residential anyway, assessments are usually more conservative and small, less, smaller than actual market value, right? So I was curious on that, and then point two was, I was wondering why the income approach was not incorporated into valuating the property, because it would seem like it seems to me that it would, well, anyway, I was curious why that was.
So, first of all, because we didn't include the parking lot, the value is very comparable to what we had carried on for the assessors, which included the parking lot value. So at 1.9, it included it, and we're coming up with a value of 1.8 minus the demolition cost of $375,000. The income approach wasn't used, and he explains it in the report, because there's no structures remaining on the property. The property is being sold for its land value, and so the way it would be valued by a developer would be to value it as vacant land, less the cost of having to demolish any structures on the land. And so the income approach wasn't appropriate. Now, the income approach is the basis for the assessed value, because we're retaining ownership. So the assessors, when they go out and calculate the value for the ICC, wouldn't be diminishing it by the demolition cost, because that's not the expectation. It's the land with the building on it, that the valuation. So the income approach is appropriate in that instance, but it's not in this instance.
It's not appropriate to identify the highest and best use of the land, because that's what's gonna happen, right? So,
Yeah, he didn't find that to be true, or the appropriate approach, and he explains that on pages 7 and 8.
No, I read that.
Other questions for Mike on the appraisal? Jim?
Yeah, why did we go to the trouble of evaluating the cost of demolishing the building in our appraisal? I mean, wouldn't it be to our advantage to find out what the best value of the property is and let the developer talk us down? I mean, we don't care what he's doing with the property, we just want to know what the best value is. He may even use some of it.
We already know that he's not using any of it. We already know that he is demolishing it, and we're coming up with a value of the land. In the end, we have a value of $1.4 million, $1.4 million. The developer is already giving us, as of last week, the end of last week, a floor of $2.2 million. So the developers is already agreed to a purchase price that is $800,000 above the assessed value, or the appraised value of this property.
That's including the municipal lot that's not included in the appraisal.
No, the municipal lot on the other side of the street has a value to him when we transfer ownership, but then he transfers ownership back, which has a value to us. So on that, it's a wash, and we've agreed that's going to be a wash. But he's still giving us $400,000 at that point to begin the preparation for moving Wentworth Hall over. So from that $400,000, we're going to be doing the design work, preparing the bid documents, literally going out to bid to put the Wentworth Hall on the other side of the street. When phase 2 starts, the developer is again going to front us $400,000, and from that, we're going to begin construction, which would include putting in a foundation, hiring the folks who are going to oversee the construction, and then subsequent to that, he's going to pay up the remaining, $1.4 million when we get onto phase 3. So he's basically paying us the value of the land at phase 3 and fronting us $800,000 in project proceeds.
other questions for Mike at this point? I think we're ready to move on to the next piece of your presentation.
The soil?
Do you want me to talk about soil?
Yeah, talk a little bit.
One of the things that you have in the package is a memorandum that are from Sanborn Head and Associates, which is an environmental and geotechnical consulting firm. They went out to the site, the location of where the Wentworth Hall would be located. And they took 6 borings to test the soils for differing levels of contamination. Just to remind everyone, this is a former Texaco site. It was cleaned up, but it was cleaned up to a commercial standard, which means that there's some amount of residual contamination that's allowed to be left in the ground, especially when it's being covered by a parking lot. The good news actually is that the contamination levels that we found were very modest. You know, we were pleasantly surprised. And that the maximum cost to remove those soils and transport them to an appropriate facility would be about $120,000, which, given that there's over 3,000 tons of soil, is actually pretty expensive. About a third of the soils have sufficiently high levels, and we're talking, 2.5 parts per billion. These are very small levels. But they're sufficiently high that they have to go to a landfill where they use for daily cover. So you have a landfill, you put the trash in every day, and then you put this soil on top. But it's a lined landfill, so it's a safe place to put it. The remainder of the soils are either completely uncontaminated or just have the equivalent of naturally occurring contaminants, things like, not around here, but things like arsenic naturally occur in the soil. And so if you've got levels that are equivalent to naturally occurring conditions, that's considered pretty close to a clean soil. How you dispose of those soils is, in the construction business, always a little bit of a trick. You can send them to what's called a similar site. So if there's somebody nearby that has a site that needs fill, I'm literally working on something like this in Quincy right now, where we're taking soils from one site where they don't need them, and again, it's just modest kind of urban fill stuff, and we're moving it a half-mile away where the recipient is happy to get them, because we'll give them to them for nothing, rather than having to transport them to some other facility at $25 a ton. The long-winded way of saying our maximum exposure here is about $120,000 for the soils. We're hopeful that about 2/3 of that soil we can find a use for. Either somebody running an asphalt batch plant, or somebody that has a construction site in Norwood or Walpole might be able to use it. And we can use DPW trucks to transport it. You don't need any sort of special trucking. So, but again, we worked it up as a worst-case scenario. The one other thing I will mention is that we found that they hit ledge at about 11 feet below ground surface. Not in all of the borings, but in a couple of them. This excavation is expected to go to about 14 feet. Now, there's some wiggle room in there with first floor elevations, but you've got to deal with accessibility, other things. But we're probably going to have a little bit of ledge to remove, so we built another $30,000 into the numbers to deal with that.
Is that going to require blasting?
I don't know. I mean, the hope would be that you could get out of there with a hoe ram. One of those things that you go.
You can probably drill at First Parish. That's what we had to do because we hit ledge for our elevator.
Yeah.
And broke a couple of them, but using that drill it can get down. I assume it's mostly the elevator that has to go down through for the shaft.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we just don't know what the integrity of that stone is.
Questions for Mr. Bailey? Okay, thank you very much.
Want me to talk?
Land development.
Okay. The other thing that you have and I know everyone has studied it in copious detail, is a land disposition agreement. And the land, it's between the town and Petruzziello Properties. And this is the contract with Petruzziello that spells out everything that's been explained to you here tonight, the rights and obligations of all of the parties. By their nature, land disposition agreements can get pretty complicated, particularly when you've got 3 different closings and you have to make sure you're tracking the timing on all of these things. It's a longer document than I ideally would have liked. It's got numerous exhibits, but I'm also quite happy with it. It's materially done. There's a couple of plan references that we were just picking up today that aren't in there yet. But, you know, when it got to be about 1 o'clock, and I had to hit send, you know, I said, we'll just catch up with those later. You know, these land disposition agreements are typically how you contract for the exchange of multiple parcels of land between public and private parties. Like I mentioned, that same Quincy project I did one a year ago with the city of Quincy to allow for construction of 160-unit multifamily property in downtown Quincy. I'm working on another one in Lynn, again on multifamily property. So, you know, while I think, you know, you look at it and it looks kind of daunting, and a lot of that's because there's page after page after page of definitions, it holds together quite well. Oh, and just to add, you know, the selectmen can't sign this until after town meeting because we need the town meeting vote to authorize them to sign it.
Questions? Okay.
Thank you.
And then one last piece of information, this document that I handed out today, the blue with the red line. We need to make a change to the Article 11 disposition article to reflect the current plan. So there's a slight change now that we have survey results on the land area as opposed to calculated results from our tax assessor's records. The main difference is that in Part A of Article 6, we had been carrying a 3,200 square foot parcel. It's now shown as 3,469 square feet. And we adjusted the amount of land that the town will receive from the developer that will be the new municipal parking lot Wentworth Hall lot to be 38,693 square feet. I think that's a few square feet off from the prior one. And then we adjusted the size of the Blue Heart Tavern to be 1,909 square feet. I think it had been 109,008 and change before. And then just added language to make it clear that the Blue Heart Tavern would be received in accordance with the terms of the land disposition agreement. The reason that's important is we don't know yet if we're actually going to take the Blue Heart Tavern parcel or if some private individual will have that to restore the building. So just a few language changes on that article. The other 2 articles remain as they were submitted. Yes.
The parcel that we may keep,
Right,
or we may.
so the process, we take all 4 parcels and we give them to the developer in Phase 1. At the end of Phase 1, we get back land on the west side of Washington Street where we'll have the municipal parking lot and Wentworth Hall. There's another tiny parcel that's next to that, about 1,900 square feet, that's sized and located to place the Blue Heart Tavern on. If there's a buyer for the Blue Heart Tavern, or someone, I shouldn't say a buyer, the person would receive the Blue Heart Tavern in exchange for their willingness to restore it and use it in a manner that we appreciate. So if we have someone who's willing to do that, they would get that piece of land for free, and they would get the building for free, and then they would put their own funds into renovating and bringing that building up to code. If there is no one who wants to take the Blue Heart Tavern and do that, or no one who's able to for whatever reason, that land would revert to the town, and it would just become town land. It would be joined with the new Wentworth Hall parcel. So we get an extra 1,900 square
Is
feet.
there a scenario where the town keeps the property and someone,
Someone else, that's a possibility. So we've been pretty open-ended in the land disposition agreement to allow every opportunity. The developer could keep it and decide to spend his own funds to restore the building on that site, or he could sell it to someone who is willing to do that, or we could take it back. We could do what we have been trying to do with the Obed Baker House, or what we were successful in doing with the Colburn School Building, where we were able to turn over that building with the historic property on it. We maintained historic preservation easements over the Colburn School Building, but we sold the land and the building to a private individual. So that's an option too, and we really won't know that for a couple of months.
Does this conclude your joint presentation, or
Well,
do you
except
have more?
that, just to be fair, a few words, so, as a member of the Islington Task Force, and now chairman of the task force, we started this 2 years ago, and everyone who paid any attention knows that I was probably the hardest one on the developer when we were going through this. And that I was probably the hardest one when it came to, trying to get this down to something that I think the residents would be comfortable with. I understand there's always going to be some people who are never going to be comfortable with any change that's proposed in Islington. I understand that. What I've done at least is tried to get it down to something that I think most of the neighbors, will at least find an upgrade, if you will. I understand some people think that the multi mixed use building is too big, but it's actually lower than the church is right now. It's denser in the fact that it covers more area where the parking lot is in the back and the library of Wentworth Hall. But they've actually stepped it back from the street so it doesn't look like the 321, 323 Washington Street, which I know numbers throw you off, and believe me, it takes me a long time to figure them out too. That would be the building that's left of the Islington Pizza Building. It seems to be closer on the sidewalk. They've pushed it back a little bit. They've made the second and third story back a little bit so it doesn't have that ominous feel as you walk by it. It started out with 28 apartments. We worked with the developer. He's down to 18 two-bedroom condos. CVS started at, with the drive-through and a bigger building. It went up and it's back down, and now it's back down without the drive-through. If you go through Islington now and see how that property is looking, even the ICC building, it's looking dilapidated. This is an opportunity, to at least try to enhance that area a little bit. I don't think it's too big, and I understand some people are always going to think it's too big, and I respectfully disagree with them. I think now it's something that the town could be proud of. The area has already looked better developed since this developer came in, and so the selectmen have voted for it, and even I, as the holdout, if you will, the first time, have come around to find that this is probably a better use of the town asset. This building was paid for in 2004, $550,000, and if you figure out the numbers, really the developer is buying a half an acre of land for us for a minimum of $2.2 million for a half acre on that corner. So I think when you take that number and say, if it was a full acre, 4.4, it's clearly, financially, it seems to be, better for the town to not have to renovate that building. And, there are going to be people, and I've already heard all of the arguments, that it would still, if we renovated it, would be a bigger building. But it would still take years and years of maintenance from the town, and we still would get no tax dollars from renovating it. So I would ask all the members to, seriously consider this project. And, if the residents are still going to have to decide, it's still going to take 2/3 vote at town meeting to pass this because of the type of article it is. So I think, give the residents, both for and against, the opportunity to do this at town meeting. Thank you.
Did the Islington Task Force vote on?
They did, yes, they did.
Give us the details on that.
So it was a unanimous vote, after looking at how much the plan had modified. I think some members were just amazed at how far it had come from, when we left there the first time, there was 6, and I had 6A, as they called it, different plans that had developed, and they voted on number 6. And even I wasn't comfortable with 6 because it was just not fitting right with the neighborhood. And so that's when the developer, I explained to him that, most of the residents did not want 28 apartments in Islington. And when they compare it to Dedham Square, that's exactly what they're comparing it to. So he went back, thought about this, talked to whoever he needed to talk to. Maybe it was his wife, I don't know. But he came back with 18 two-bedroom apartments. And immediately, that had a lot of people, not looking so down on the project. And I think it's really come a long way. And so the Islington Task Force, after having looked at it, unanimously voted to tell the planning board that they support it. And that's where it ended.
And one other vote that's occurred since we last met with you, the Conservation Commission has reviewed the plan, and they voted to issue a notice of intent to allow the project to move forward. And that was also a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Any other questions from members for the negotiating team? I want to open it up at this point to questions or comments from residents on this. Yes, ma'am. If you could please identify yourself, your name, and where you live, please. Waiting for the microphone. Thank you.
My name is Caroline Layden, and I live at 136 School Street. And I have two questions. My first question is, when I was looking at the fact sheet, the redevelopment conditions, the estimated capital for Wentworth Hall project, the 1.5 million, is that going to have to be financed, or is there money already available to cover the shortfall? And if it's going to be financed, or the fees associated with financing, I'm assuming you'd have to get a bond. Have they been incorporated into the estimated costs of the project? And then the other question I had was, will all the affordable housing units discussed today, including those at the ski shop, be put in service for 2020, or will they be past the point where they wouldn't be able to be counted?
Nora Loughnane, I think, who's going to answer those questions, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes. So the first question about the funding, that's what Article 12 that's before you tonight would do. That would be a borrowing article that would allow for payment of the amount that the town would have to spend on Wentworth Hall, some of which would be reimbursed by the developer, but not all. The estimate does carry fees for bonding included within that. The total estimate for the construction is actually $3,531,265, and that includes the bonding costs. And, sorry, I'm losing, what was the other question? The affordable housing units, yes. So the first single affordable housing unit that's added at 321 Washington Street, the existing mixed-use building, that will bring us an additional 9 units in that building to be counted, that would be done before the start of Phase 1. That's a closing requirement. So the thought here is, if this is approved at town meeting, the closing would occur in the fall, and that would be done prior to fall. So we would have that unit listed right away. That would get us, we have 2 units in that building now, we would have a total of 10. The 2 other units that would be above the ski stop would be listed when the condominiums are constructed. So that's in Phase 3. It's too early to tell if that would be in 2020. It may be, it may not.
Just for the record, so he did ask the same question about those other 2 units, and the developer was going back to check. He presently has them leased right now, so he needs to go back and check on those leases and see, when that might be appropriate, that he might be able to convert them. He didn't say outright no. He said he would have to go back and look into it and see, knowing where we are at this point in time, if that was an option.
Other questions or comments from residents? Yes, ma'am. Oh, if you could wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Christine Privatera, 16 Dean Street. I actually had a question about the affordable housing as well. I live in that area, and the ski shop was in the 200s, because if you look at the buildings, Crown Cleaners is 266 to 278. And then after that, there was a hairdresser. There is a hairdresser. Then the ski shop, which maybe the developer can clarify. But that seems to be where the Islington Barber Shop is now. And therefore, apartments, as I understood at many meetings, were going to be above the ski stop. Well, I forgot my camera, but I can show you a picture that this home care company is going to be on the 2nd floor. So how can that be affordable housing apartment. And Nora stated that it's going to be at 562. Where is 562?
Could you address that?
Yes,
Nora?
so the property address now that was for the ski stop, I actually just sent Chris an email earlier tonight. I believe the existing address may be 560. I don't actually have in front of me what the existing address is. But there was a single commercial establishment, the ski stop on the first floor. There was one central door that let you get into the ski stop and to the apartments above. There are 2 apartments above, one on the second floor, one on the third floor. There are tenants that are in those buildings. One of the tenants operates a home care business as a home occupation out of her apartment. Those are existing. The developer has put 2 commercial spaces on the first floor where Ski Stop used to be. One is Matt the Barber, and the other is an open commercial space that has not, as far as I know, has not yet been leased. In doing that, he's created 3 doors to the front of the building. So there's the center door that had always been there, and then 2 new side doors, one for the barber shop and one for the second commercial user. And the center door will now be just for the apartments above. The Selectman's office is going to reestablish the addresses so it's clear. You have 560 for the first commercial unit, 562 and 564 through the central door to the 2 apartments, and 566 would be the address for the second commercial unit. I think that's where Matt the Barber is. So we're changing the addresses to make it consistent with what the police and fire would want to see as the available addresses between the 2 properties on either side. The apartments right now are both leased. They both have tenants. The proposal is that these units would be made affordable units in the 3rd phase of the project prior to the certificate of occupancy for the 18 condominium units that may be in 2019, that may be in 2020, we don't know yet, but the leases that are in there now are single-year leases. So when those leases come up for renewal, the developer will not renew those leases. Instead, he will make the properties available for affordable users. That requires an approved marketing plan by the Department of Housing and Community Development. We've done it on other properties in town. He's done it on his units at 321 Washington Street and is familiar with the process. So they will become affordable units, assuming that they're approvable by the Department of Community and Housing and Community Development. So one of those units is, the second floor unit is a full-size unit that goes, it's the size of the 2 commercial 2 commercial spaces on the first floor. So it's a fairly large apartment unit. The one on the 3rd floor is an attic unit, and it is smaller. I think it's somewhere in the area of 500 to 600 square feet. So we will check with the state to see if that's an acceptable, affordable apartment, and if it's not, then there'll be another alternative that's proposed. The Planning Board's FMUOD special permit requires that the developer find 2 additional residential units other than the one that's being instituted at 321. So that will be done, and that has to be done before the condominium units receive their CVOs.
Well,
I'm sorry, do you mean 260 and 266 Washington?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say 5? Yes, I'm sorry to confuse you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's 256 now. It will be
50.
Yes.
We're following you.
Sorry about that. Yes.
that's what I was trying to tell Nora, but I'm glad she listened to you, sir. Anyway, there says home care company coming. Is that true? Or is it already there?
It's already there.
And if that, like all of those meetings, we were told there would be affordable housing. Now you say it might be 2 years before there's affordable housing. That is not how the agreement should be. There should be affordable housing from the get-go.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from residents? Yes, sir.
It's just more a question of clarification.
Could you
Tony
state your
Mullen,
name?
Tony Mullen, 126 Pond Street, also on the school committee. It's more a point of clarification because I want to make sure we have what's for the school and for this. At the last FinCom meeting, there was an ask for a 2-page summary of the facts, like here's the data. Is that what one of the, is this what, which document is the 2-page facts of the economic?
It says fact sheet on it.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure I have what's clear, because I think you asked for it for the school as well, so I just want to make clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments? Yes. Yes, sir.
Al Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. Just a point of clarification, the projected annual revenue is $424,000, and it was stated is at the end of Phase 3. Is it the end of Phase 3, or is it when the all 18 condominiums are sold?
It's when the 18 condominiums and all of Phase 3 is constructed, not when they're sold.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Debbie Conan, 21 Strasser Ave. So when the original RFP came forward, there was the original deal had been for a non-cash payment of $3.2 million. I know a lot's changed in the meantime. But I'm just wondering why we have to front the money first and then get it back in Phase 3, which is going to take several years to do that. And also, too, the original minimum purchase price was over $2.5 million. And that was in the RFP, now we're at $2.2 million. So I don't know if someone could explain that.
Sure, I can explain that. The purchase price is for the 4 town-owned parcels. That's outright. If we would sell all the parcels and receive nothing in return, no land in return, it would be $2,575,000. We're not selling all of our land and getting nothing back. In fact, we're selling 1.46 acres and receiving back 0.93 acres. So we're really only selling just over a half of an acre. We're taking back some of the compensation in land and some of the compensation in cash. So we'll receive back 0.93 acres plus $2.2 million. So if you note that the purchase price in the RFP is $2,575,000, we're getting all but $375,000 in cash, and we're getting almost an acre of land. So we're actually getting far more than the RFP anticipated.
Okay, so, I'm sorry.
Your
Final
go ahead.
question. So as far as the affordability, it seems like that's going to be used as leverage for passing the project. And I definitely agree, we need the affordable housing. But the housing stood up at the last planning board meeting and said, we don't need any more 1-bedroom units. We need 2- and 3-bedroom units to house single women who have children or single men who have children. And I think that, I feel like we're rushing just to get this through to town meeting right now. And we could look at, we own the Obed Baker. We could do something with that for affordable. We own all that land behind the First Parish Church. I think that there are other options, and that that things could be done instead of just rushing to try to get the affordable housing in. It is important, I understand that, but it just seems like there's so many open-ended issues still going on, and we don't really have all the facts yet.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from residents? Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
John Cummings, 4 Chickadee Lane. I want to say thank you to everyone for deliberating, and I know that this has gone on for years, and the project is really, as Selectman Walsh had mentioned, has really come to something that, as a resident of Islington, I'm looking forward to coming. And it wouldn't have done without all the hard work and sweat equity that everybody in the room has put in. I wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kate Wynn, 10 Cedar Hill Drive. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Cummings said and also say I'd love to see it come to town meeting. I'm excited to see it come to town meeting. I think it's going to be, if it gets there, it'll be fun. But I also wanted to, sorry, I also wanted to say, our children and everyone in our communities make such terrific use of Islington, and but most especially I'm looking for the improvement for our youth and family services with a new building. They do such important work, and I'd love to see them in a space that really supports that. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from residents? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Team Privatera, 16 Dean Street. I do want to applaud the developer and his attorney. I think that they have done a great job in addressing the residents' concerns. However, I am extremely disappointed in our town officials. They come tonight, and they still don't have all the numbers. I really am disappointed. You know, a piece of paper is handed to you tonight is what I understand. And then even the ash that was discussed last week, I believe one of the officials said, well, it could be put on some of our own land. Well, why didn't they know before last week's meeting if it could? And have this unknown number of $40,000 to $100,000. Get the numbers. But thank you, developer. Thank you.
Just to clarify, we're using the worst-case scenario for the movement of soil, and you determine where it could go at the time you're moving it based on what available projects are going on. So if there's a construction project somewhere in the area that needs fill, we won't know today. We'll know closer to the project.
Yes, sir. If you would please identify yourself.
Good evening. My name's Peter Zucker. I'm the attorney. I want to thank you because we never get credit for doing anything other than showing up at meetings. On behalf of Giorgio Petruzziello, who's here, we also want to thank everybody. This has been a long project over several years, and an interesting one from the standpoint that, and I just want the public to recognize, the way the town set this up is to the protection of the town, because it's actually a backwards project. Typically, on most projects, you go and get rezoning. Then you go through a permitting process after the rezoning. Here, my client, by the way the town has set up the RFP, has actually gone through a full permitting process, spending the hundreds of thousands of dollars with clearly no guarantee as to what could happen at town meeting. My client entered this at the invitation, if you will, of the town. The town issued an RFP, and he has considered this from the very beginning as a joint venture, and everybody's mentioned the changes that have been made since his initial submission to the town. And all of those changes have an economic impact for both the developer's perspective as well as the town's perspective, and clearly those have been have to be weighed by the town. But the one thing I just want to say, because I'm not sure everybody, I'm sure you do, but I don't know if the public does, because we keep talking about phasing and 3 closings. Clearly, from a developer's perspective, he'd love to give the town whatever the money is all at once and buy all the properties at the same time, get all his permits, and then do multiple construction activities at the same time. And I just want to make it clear that it's being phased because of a number of the requirements, both in the RFP as well as the special permit. And thus, we've had to have the 3 closings. We could argue should it be $200,000 to start or $400,000 to start, but the first phase is being done because it doesn't displace anybody in terms of we have to try to keep as much of the current parking lot or parking spaces available while the new CVS is being done. And that's phase 1. We can't do any other phase until that is completed. And then we're doing phase 2, which is really the town relocating the Wentworth Hall across the street while we renovate the existing CVS, because one of the requirements in the RFP, the special permit, is that we make a new home for the MMO daycare in the existing CVS building. So we can't displace them. Likewise, the town agencies are still operating in the ICC, and they can't be displaced. So I think it's important that people understand that clearly it would be easier for everybody if we came up with a number and said, let's close all at once. But the phasing has been essentially mandated due to the requirements of keeping people in operation while that goes on. And clearly, from my client's perspective, everybody knows the numbers today. As indicated in the land disposition agreement, it talks about future appraisals so we can get a better, more accurate number right before the closing. Today, everybody would know what those numbers are, and we could move on. So I think it's important that people understand that the phasing is really due to the way the RFP, the special permits, and the town has required in order to keep things operational. Again, in the end, though, I just want to say my client has really appreciated the efforts, starting back with the Islington Task Force, who met, what seemed like 20 times on this project, the planning board, and the long time that they had spent on this. And the numbers that are being presented to you, and again, I just say this for public consumption, I know you're aware of this, are not my client's numbers. My client did present numbers, be it a fiscal impact report, be it parking numbers, but the town, at quite a bit of expense of my client, hired their own experts. And so the numbers that you're hearing tonight in terms of the economic value, in terms of the real estate tax, et cetera, really have come from your own consultants hired by the town. So, and again, I just point that out. I don't want the public to think the developer came in and said there's only going to be 3 school children at 18 condominium units. That was clearly, I mean, we agree with it, but that was a number that was came up with by the town's consultant, who has done other projects in Westwood, and actually has seemed to be pretty much on mark on those other ones. So again, on behalf of my client, I thank you for this process.
Thank you. FinCom members, I note that the planning board is here and our town planner. Before we close the public hearing, I just want to make sure that none of you have any questions for the planning board on the article we have to vote on tonight. Seeing...
I assume that the planning board has voted these all? Okay.
Yes.
And what was the vote? 4-1? Okay, thanks.
Was there? Oh, yes, ma'am. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Good evening. Nada Milosavljevic, Fabrizio, 32 Webster Street. I have a question with respect to the soil testing that was done recently. I look at this report and I see, I can't even pronounce it, benzoapyrene was identified. And it's actually, they say, a little in excess of the reportable conditions, and that it was sent to a lab and should be back in 7 to 10 days. My question, I guess, is to Mr. Bailey. The Massachusetts contingency plan is 909 pages. And I'm not an expert, and I've been reviewing it. But the question that I have specifically is 310 CMR indicates that there are all different reporting categories, but 310 CMR indicates that the reporting category is an RCS1 that should be applied to soil samples obtained, and it says at or within 500 feet of a residential dwelling. It's my understanding that 277A Washington Street is a residential dwelling. So I guess I'm looking for assurances that Sanborn Head, the environmental engineers, won't try to manipulate the rules and regulations just so that this project can pass.
Thank you.
You're right. There are a lot of pages. I'm surprised there aren't more than 909 pages of the regulations. And what NADA is referring to, it's in Table 1 of the report, and that's a summary of the soil analytical data. And there's a whole bunch of information there, but there's one data point that's particularly important. And NADA mentions what's called the RCS1, which is the most conservative, within 500 feet of a residential dwelling. So the most conservative requirement for when you have to report contamination to DEP. The results showed that there was 2.2 milligrams per kilogram of benzoapyrene in one of the samples. The reporting requirement is 2 milligrams per kilogram. I've talked with Matt Heil, who's the licensed site professional, about this. He believes that that hit is due to the presence of ash. Ash is very frequently found in these old sites. It was a common fill. It's what's called a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, or a PAH. And the additional testing that they're doing is to determine whether that benzoapyrene is the result of the ash, in which case it would be exempt from being reported to DEP. If it's not exempt, the town will have an obligation to report it to DEP and to handle it in accordance with state regulatory requirements.
Thank you. I think it's been suggested, if one of you, we've got 3 articles that are before us tonight for our voting. Would one of you, just for the benefit of the public, just very briefly summarize what each of them is? We've obviously talked about them several times. This is our 4th hearing, but I think it would just be helpful to have a quick summary for the benefit of everyone. So these are Articles 11, 12, and 13.
Do that. So
Thank you.
Article 11 is the disposition article, and this is a 4-part article. Part A allows the town to convey land, essentially the 4 town-owned parcels that are part of the RFP, Lot 163, Lot 188, Lot 189, and a portion of Lot 190. They would be the first portion of that article allows them to be conveyed to a developer. Part B allows the town to acquire land in return, so that would be the land that we would receive on the west side of Washington Street, the Wentworth Hall municipal lot, as well as the Blue Hart Tavern if that comes to be. Part C allows us to acquire by purchase, gift, or eminent domain or otherwise, and to abandon any and all easements, rights, including rights of way or restrictions, as is necessary or convenient to convey or acquire clear title to the above referenced parcels of land on terms acceptable to the Board of Selectmen. What that does is allows us to wipe out any title issues that are on any of the land that's involved in this. And Part D allows the selectmen to enter into any and all agreements and execute any and all instruments as may be necessary or convenient on behalf of the town to effect the above actions. What that part does is allows the selectmen to sign the land disposition agreement that you have the draft version in front of you. Just a couple of tweaks on surveying data that need to go in there. So those are the 4 parts of the first article. That's called the disposition article. It allows us to swap property. The second article is called the funding article, and this says to see if the town will vote to appropriate a sum of money to pay cost of designing, relocating, constructing, originally equipping, and furnishing a relocated and expanded Wentworth Hall, including the payment of all cost incidental and related thereto, such facility to be located on property across from the current location of the Islington Library, and to determine whether this amount shall be raised by taxation, transfer from available funds, borrowing or otherwise, or to take any other action relative thereto. And in this document, I also have a motion that has been recommended to you by bond counsel. That motion includes a dollar amount of $3.5 million, which is more than necessary to accomplish the tasks at hand. And then Article 13 is titled the zoning article map. And this essentially would take 2 parcels that are shown on the plan you have in front of you as in the before stage as developer-owned land, and in the after stage as part developer-owned land, part town-owned land. There are 2 properties. One is 9 School Street, which is the site of the former Westwood tailor shop. It also is the temporary home to the Blue Hart Tavern, and it has a large wooded area in the back of it. That parcel is zoned as a residential parcel, single residence E, and this zoning article would change that zoning to local business B and also overlay the parcel with a flexible multiple use overlay district 6 designation. So it would be part of the FMUOD district and it would be a commercial lot. That's necessary to allow the CVS to go on that parcel. The other parcel is the Cohen parcel, the residential property at 277A Washington Street. That would also be rezoned from single residence A to local business B and overlain with the same FMUOD district. That parcel would end up being owned by the town and would be part of the municipal parking lot.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions from members, we will now close the public hearing portion of this meeting. I want to thank everyone for attending and for engaging with us tonight, and throughout this entire year, and for some of you, years in working on these issues. So thank you very much for your participation and your help. Thank you very much, Chairman Hickey and the negotiating team. Thank you, all of us, for the additional presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we now have the business before us of voting on these 3 articles. I just want to make clear to everyone that given the additional hearing that was planned for tonight, and given that that was an unexpected meeting to add, we were not able to have a full complement of members here tonight. So as you know, I sent all of you an email asking those who were unable to participate tonight to send their thoughts on these articles to Jane, if they would like them to be shared. And I understand that Jane only received thoughts from Mike O'Hara, who could not be here tonight. I have them in front of me. I haven't read them yet, but I'd like to just share them publicly with you before we start deliberating.
Members have them too,
Okay, and I'm told you have these in front of you also, but just for the record, these are Mike's thoughts. He states that this is not an easy decision for the town, but it appears to me that we are getting some very important things out of this deal, including the eventual elimination of the retrofitting and operating costs of the ICC, an attractive master plan development, as opposed to random one-off projects, an upgraded Wentworth Hall that will be expanded for other uses and made accessible to all residents, reasonable consideration for town property for which we have no specific allocated needs beyond those proposed in the project. He goes on to say that the town and the various boards have been careful about the environmental cleanup costs associated with the former underground storage tank and what is now the Washington Street Town parking lot, as well as traffic and parking concerns. Importantly, the town, the developer, and CVS were highly responsive to resident concerns about the size of the new CVS and the traffic considerations around that building. He goes on to say, personally, I believe the project will add to the increasingly attractive area in Islington Town Center, adding to the fire station Morrison and the new and renovated Petruzziello buildings. As a FinCom member, I believe the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, and the multidisciplinary Islington Center Task Force are not self-interested, have been highly diligent, have been transparent and open, and have negotiated hard and in good faith. They have also listened to residents and tried to incorporate the wishes of the immediate neighbors into the development. Therefore, I support the project on substantive and procedural grounds. Okay. We have these 3 articles. We could do this, well, I suppose we need a motion on one of them, but would people just prefer to have a general conversation about the 3 articles first? Or we could, I suppose, start more procedurally would be to have a motion on Article 11
I'll
to
make a
start.
motion to approve Article 11.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve Article 11, and it's been seconded. Discussion. Howard.
I'm going to talk probably about all 3 together.
I think that's fine.
But I think we have a unique situation. We have, if you really want to put this in very simple terms, the town owns 2 old and dilapidated buildings and a parking lot. And we have a unique situation where we have a developer who is somewhat known to the town, who owns some, with all due respect, old and dilapidated commercial buildings. And the end result of all this is the town ends up with some nice new properties, and the commercial properties are redeveloped into a nice commercial area for the town. The icing on the cake is the affordable housing. I'm not talking about the money for a second. But it really is unique in the sense that the developer already owns the other parcels. And any chance of us doing anything with the properties we own, probably slim to none, unless we seize this opportunity at this time. So I'm going to vote in favor of all three of these articles. I've looked at the numbers. They look reasonable to me. Nobody really knows exactly how much a piece of property is worth. It's really only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. We've done some negotiations. We've got somebody willing to pay for it. It seems reasonable to me. It doesn't seem like it'll be a big financial investment one way or the other for the town, other than the issues of affordable housing. So I think it's a real net positive, and I urge my fellow members to vote for it.
George?
Yeah, what I'd like to add is maybe talk about the process, having started with the Islington Task Force, and I would note that I believe at least 5 or 6 of the members of the task force were Islington residents. And that in itself started with a survey, in my opinion, was a very, very open process. I then sat through many of the planning board meetings. I've listened to joint meetings with the Conservation Commission. I think at the end of the day, it's a credit to the volunteers and elected officials, to work their way through this process. And as Howard pointed out, it's a unique opportunity, and I hope we don't let it slip through our hands. But my compliment to the selectmen, but I think as Chief Negotiator Walsh mentioned, the health of the process was there were some pushes and pulls. And I think through it, we've evolved into something that, to me, will give the town some very, very nice new assets. We've always made a commitment to Islington to maintain the branch library. This is going to be a beautiful branch library. We'll have good community space. I personally think that having seen some of the work the developer has done in Dedham Center's become vibrant. And he has done a lot of that development there. And the feedback I've had from people has been very, very positive in terms of the way this gentleman develops his property and maintains it. So I would hope that, as Howard said, that we vote all three of these articles. We have to vote all three successfully for the project to go forward. Defeat of one item basically prevents the project from going forward. So it really is an integrated vote. But I want to compliment the selectmen, the planning board, the task force members, the FinCom in terms of the amount of effort that's gone into evaluating this. And I, too, am going to support all three articles.
And George, I'd like to publicly thank you as our representative to the task force for, I believe, over 2 years, attending many meetings, some over the summer, being very diligent about that. So thank you very much for your service. Other comments? Tom?
I'd also, I agree with everything that Howard and George said, and I would add that it was interesting to hear that, what Howard said is something is worth what someone's willing to pay for, what they're willing to pay for it, and despite my questioning of the appraisal, that's the fact of the matter is that there was one developer that was involved in the mix, and so supply and demand, that can obviously impact what something's going to be worth. So I think that that's also a reflection though of maybe the developer landscape in the town. If it was viewed as more developer friendly, then maybe there would have been more developers that would have been part of the process, or at least been involved in the mix. So I think that that's something to learn from. I think it's a really good project, and it was nice to hear commentary that people appreciated the developers' outreach efforts and all. The one thing I would say that I disagreed with one of the residents was that I do think that the affordable housing aspect, that there is a time sense of urgency component there. 2020 is coming up, and I think that this opportunity should be taken advantage of, because if not, I think that we would find ourselves in a difficult situation to really come up with the units that we need to within that time frame. So I do think there is a sense of urgency from a time standpoint.
Jim?
Just from my perspective, we got a lot of information in the last 5 hours, even more in the last 72 hours, and separating the project itself from the financial end, I had other priorities this weekend that had to be focused on and missed the opening part of this meeting. So I'm just uncomfortable with voting from the financial perspective in this last minute.
Other thoughts? Julie?
I'll just make the observation, I think people realize that all of us on FinCom have conversations on basketball courts, at soccer games, et cetera, and I think the commitment to those in Islington to shaping this project to be something that reflects the town is admirable. And I would say the feedback I've gotten, I don't know about all of you, and the noise has quieted over time. So what that tells me is the process we've gone through has gotten us as a town to a better place between the project and the residents. So, you know, people don't like conflict, but I do think without that healthy tension, you don't get the best result. So I appreciate people's time and energy in going to these meetings and reaching out to us and voicing their concerns.
Any other thoughts? Are people comfortable to vote on this? Okay. So there's a motion to approve that's pending. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Abstaining. Article 11. Okay, moving on to Article 12.
Make a motion to approve Article 12.
I'll second it.
And there's a motion to approve, and it's been seconded. Further discussion. I realize this is an extension, if you will, of Article 11 with respect to being the funding for this project, which we've discussed. Are there any other thoughts or concerns that people would like to add? Are people comfortable voting? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? One abstention. Okay. Moving on to Article 13, relative to the zoning for this project. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve. It's been seconded. Again, this is part of what we've been discussing, but any further discussion with respect to this article specifically? Are people comfortable to vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
Abstaining.
One abstention. Okay, that concludes our voting. A couple of business items, if I may. Number one, May 30th is town meeting. So we'll see you there. There will also be a reorg meeting in June, so Jane will be in touch on that. And lastly, I just want to thank Jane O'Donnell for being such a great administrator for FinCom throughout the year. She works really hard and keeps us organized, so I hope we can all publicly thank her tonight. Thank you, Jane.
I'm going to take over the meeting for a second. We want to thank Mary Ann. This is Mary Ann's last meeting. She's been our fearless leader through thick and thin, through Islington, through fire departments, through University Station. I don't know what all else.
Library.
The library, the police station, the fire station. Yeah, we're going to name a building after her. And we didn't know she'd be using the fire department services, but she got to use that too.
Thank you, Chief.
Anyway, we are going to miss you. You've been our fearless leader. I'm not sure, you know, you decided to be the chair, or you chose to run for chair, and Nobody else has come up since. And
Nobody else
everybody's kind
wanted
of
to
looked
do
at
it.
you and hoped that you would run again. So we're going to have a problem next year. But anyway, we wanted to thank you very much. You've been. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
It's all you, Barb. Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a privilege. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Can't you make
All
that
in
motion?
favor?
Second.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Michael.
Oh, this is lovely.